I heard my daughter-in-law mumble, "This tacky old lady. She was only invited to pay for everything." I just smiled. She wanted to feel superior? On Monday, I tripled her rent. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Mabel, and at 69, I thought I'd heard every cruel thing a person could say. I was wrong. Christmas dinner at my son David's house had always been my favorite tradition. For 15 years, I'd been the one footing the bill for everything. The prime rib, the wine, the elaborate decorations Ophelia insisted were absolutely necessary. I never minded. Family was family, and David was my only child. I was in the kitchen, quietly washing the crystal glasses Ophelia had demanded we use, when I heard her voice from the dining room. She was talking to her sister on the phone, thinking no one could hear. "This tacky old lady was only invited to pay for everything," she said with a laugh that made my blood run cold. "Honestly, Diane, she shows up in those awful cardigans and acts like she belongs here. David feels sorry for her, but between you and me, she's just an embarrassment." I stood frozen at the sink, a wine glass trembling in my hands. The water kept running, but I couldn't move. 15 years of Christmas dinners, 15 years of birthday parties, vacation funds, emergency car repairs, and down payments. 15 years of being called generous to my face while being mocked behind my back. The worst part is how she tries to give advice about decorating and cooking, Ophelia continued. Like, honey, look at your own apartment before you tell me how to arrange flowers. Thank God David makes enough that we won't need her handouts much longer. I set the glass down carefully and walked to the guest bathroom, closing the door behind me. In the mirror, I saw exactly what Ophelia saw. A 70-year-old woman in a green cardigan from JCPenney, with graying hair and laugh lines earned from years of trying to keep everyone happy. I looked like someone's harmless grandmother, someone who'd never hurt a fly. How wrong they all were. When I returned to the kitchen, David was loading the dishwasher. "Mom, you don't have to clean up. Ophelia and I can handle this." "It's all right, sweetheart. I don't mind helping." I dried my hands on the dish towel, the same one I'd bought them last Christmas. Everything in this house had my fingerprints on it, one way or another. Ophelia swept into the kitchen then, her blonde hair perfectly styled, wearing the designer dress I'd helped pay for when David got his promotion. She barely glanced at me. "David? Honey, your mother left her purse in the living room again." She said it like I was senile, like forgetting a purse was evidence of mental decline. "I'll get it," I said quietly. "No rush," Ophelia replied, already focused on her phone. "Oh, and David, remind me to call the decorator tomorrow. I want to completely redo the guest room before your cousin's wedding. More money. Always more money." I retrieved my purse, a practical leather bag I'd owned for 8 years. Inside was my checkbook, the same one I'd used to write countless checks to make their life easier. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Well, I should head home," I announced, returning to the kitchen. David hugged me goodbye, and for just a moment, I saw my little boy in his face, the one who used to crawl into my lap when thunderstorms scared him, who brought me dandelions from the yard and called them the prettiest flowers ever. "Thanks for dinner, Mom. And for, well, everything." I patted his cheek. "You're welcome, sweetheart." Ophelia offered a mechanical smile. "Drive safe, Mabel. Thanks for the lovely evening." Lovely evening. As if she'd contributed anything beyond her presence and her cruelty. The drive home took 20 minutes, long enough for the full weight of what I'd heard to settle in. By the time I parked in front of my small apartment building, something had shifted inside me. The hurt was still there, sharp and deep, but underneath it was something else, something that had been sleeping for too long. I sat in my car, staring up at my third-floor window. 3 rooms. Nothing fancy. David had offered to help me find something bigger, more suitable, but I'd always declined. Let him think I was being modest. Let them all think I was just getting by on Social Security and David's guilty conscience. Let them think whatever they wanted. Tomorrow was Monday. And Monday, Ophelia was going to learn exactly who she'd been calling a tacky old lady. I smiled in the darkness of my car. After 15 years of playing the grateful grandmother, It was time to remove the mask. Monday morning, I woke up at 5:30, same as I had every day for the past 40 years. But today felt different. Today, I had work to do. I made my coffee, black, no sugar, and sat at my small kitchen table with my laptop. Most people David's age would be surprised to know I even owned one, let alone knew how to use it. They saw the cardigans and assumed I was technologically helpless. Another assumption that served me well. I opened my property management software and scrolled through my portfolio. 37 rental properties across 3 states. Not bad for a woman who'd started with nothing but a high school diploma and the determination to never be powerless again. I found the file I was looking for. 1247 Maple Street, Unit 4B. David and Ophelia's luxury apartment. The one they thought they'd gotten through David's connections at work. The rent was currently $2,800 a month, well below market value. I'd been giving them what I called the family discount for 5 years, though they had no idea their landlord was the tacky old lady who paid for their Christmas dinner. I updated the lease agreement. New monthly rent, $8,400. Triple the current amount, but still within legal limits for their area. The lease allowed for increases with 30 days' notice, a clause I'd made sure to include when I'd had my lawyer draft it. I printed the official notice and slipped it into an envelope marked Hastings Property Management, my company, though I'd kept my maiden name for business purposes. Even David didn't know his mother had gone back to using Richardson professionally. At 9 a.m. sharp, I drove to their apartment building. I'd bought the entire complex 6 years ago when the previous owner was facing foreclosure. 24 units, all generating steady income, the building that David bragged about living in, calling it a steal to his friends. If only he knew. I slipped the envelope under their door, just as I did with all my tenants. Professional, impersonal, legal. Then I went home and waited. The call came at 11:47 a.m. Mom. David's voice was strained. Something weird happened. We got this notice saying our rent is being tripled. It has to be a mistake. I was sitting in my favorite chair, the threadbare recliner that Ophelia had once suggested I upgrade. I kept my voice steady, concerned. Oh my goodness, that's terrible. What does the notice say exactly? It's from something called Hastings Property Management. They're saying the rent is going from $2,800 to $8,400 a month. That's insane. We can't afford that. Have you tried calling them? Maybe it's an error in their system. I called 3 times. The woman who answered said all rent increases are final and legally binding. She was so cold about it, Mom. Like she didn't care that we might have to move. I made appropriate sympathetic noises while filing my nails. That's awful, sweetheart. What did Ophelia say? There was a pause. She's upset. Really upset. She's been crying since we got the notice. Crying. The same woman who'd laughed about calling me tacky was now crying because she couldn't afford to keep living above her means. I'm so sorry this is happening, I said, and part of me meant it. I was sorry it had come to this. Sorry that 15 years of kindness and generosity had been met with such contempt. Mom, I hate to ask, but could you help us out? Just until I figure out what to do? Maybe a loan to cover the difference for a few months? There it was. The same request I'd been hearing for years, dressed up in different emergencies. The car that broke down, the medical bill that insurance didn't cover, the vacation that Ophelia desperately needed for her mental health. David, honey, you know I'd help if I could, but my budget is pretty tight these days. It wasn't a lie exactly. I did have a budget. It just happened to include 37 properties and a 7-figure net worth. I understand, Mom. I don't know what we're going to do. That afternoon, Ophelia called me directly. Her voice was different, smaller, more fragile than I'd ever heard it. Mabel, I hope you don't mind me calling. David said you might not be able to help with our rent situation, but I thought maybe, could you at least co-sign a loan for us? We're good for it, obviously, but the banks are being so difficult. I almost smiled. 2 days ago, I was a tacky old lady. Today, I was her potential financial savior. Oh, Ophelia, I wish I could help, but my credit isn't what it used to be. Another lie. My credit score was 812. I see. Her voice was tight now, the sweetness cracking around the edges. Well, if you think of anything, of course, dear. I'll keep you both in my prayers. After I hung up, I sat back in my chair and looked around my modest apartment. 3 rooms that had housed countless family dinners, birthday celebrations, and holiday mornings. Walls that had heard David's first words, witnessed his first steps, absorbed tears from scraped knees and broken hearts. This wasn't about money. This had never been about money. This was about respect, about being seen as more than a walking ATM, about a son who'd forgotten where he came from and a daughter-in-law who thought kindness was weakness. Tomorrow, Ophelia would start looking for a new apartment. She'd discover that luxury living was expensive, and her husband's salary wouldn't stretch as far as she'd thought. But first, she'd have to face the truth about the tacky old lady who'd been paying her way all along. 3 days after the rent notice, David showed up at my apartment unannounced. I was watering my African violets when I heard his key in the lock, the spare I'd given him years ago for emergencies. "Mom?" His voice echoed through my small living room. "Are you home?" "In here, sweetheart." I set down my watering can and smoothed my cardigan. The same green one I'd worn to Christmas dinner? He looked terrible, dark circles under his eyes, his usually perfect hair disheveled. His expensive suit, the one I'd helped him buy for his promotion, was wrinkled like he'd slept in it. "David, you look exhausted. Sit down, let me make you some coffee." He slumped onto my old sofa, the one Ophelia had once suggested I replace with something more contemporary. "Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." I paused, my hand on the coffee tin. Something in his voice made my chest tighten. "Of course. What is it? Do you know anything about Hastings Property Management?" I kept my expression neutral, though my heart started beating faster. "Should I? I've been doing research on our landlord, trying to find some way to negotiate this rent increase, and I found something strange." He pulled out his phone, scrolling through what looked like property records. "Hastings Property Management has been buying buildings all over the city for the past 15 years. Small apartment complexes, commercial properties, even that strip mall where you get your prescriptions filled." I said nothing, just continued preparing the coffee. My hands were steady, but inside, I felt the first flutter of something that might have been panic. The weird thing is, I can't find much information about who owns the company. It's all very private, professional. "Maybe they like their privacy," I said, bringing him a mug of coffee. Black, 2 sugars, the way he'd liked it since he was 12. That's what I thought too. But then I started thinking about the timing. He looked up at me, his eyes searching my face. "Our rent has been below market value for 5 years, Mom. Way below. Almost like someone was giving us a family discount." The silence stretched between us. I sat down in my recliner, the one that had held me through late nights when he was sick as a child, through the lonely years after his father left us with nothing but debt and broken promises. "David, what are you asking me?" "I'm asking if you've been paying our landlord all these years. Have you been covering the difference in our rent? If only it were that simple. If only I were just a generous mother helping her struggling children instead of the property owner they'd been insulting and taking advantage of." "No, sweetheart. I haven't been paying your landlord." It was technically true. I hadn't been paying myself. He relaxed slightly, but the worry lines around his eyes remained. "Ophelia thinks someone's playing a sick joke on us. She's convinced this is personal." "Personal? Why would she think that?" David set down his coffee and rubbed his temples. "She's been different since we got the notice. Paranoid. She keeps saying someone must hate us, that this is too calculated to be random. Paranoid. Not entirely wrong, though I wouldn't call it hate. Disappointment, maybe. Hurt that had festered for too long." "Have you looked at other apartments?" I asked gently. "Mom, do you know how much decent places cost now? Everything in our budget is—" He gestured around my living room. "Well, it's like this. Small, old, nothing like what Ophelia's used to. Nothing like this. My home, where I'd raised him, where I'd worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table and clothes on his back, where I'd stayed up nights helping him with homework and nursing him through every childhood illness. There's nothing wrong with small and old, David. I've been happy here." "I know, Mom. I didn't mean it like that. It's just, Ophelia has certain expectations. Expectations. Like designer dresses and luxury apartments and Christmas dinners she didn't have to pay for. like a mother-in-law who existed solely to fund her lifestyle while staying quietly in the background. What did she say when you told her you might have to move somewhere smaller? David was quiet for a long moment. She said maybe it was time to consider putting you in assisted living. The words hit me like ice water. Excuse me? She thinks your apartment building might be converted to condos soon, and that you'd be happier somewhere with more support. Somewhere that wouldn't be such a financial burden. Financial burden? I almost laughed. I owned this building too. She's already looked into some places. Nice places. Mom, with activities and meal plans. She says the monthly fee would probably be less than what you're paying now in rent and groceries. And what do you think about this idea? I think... He stopped, seeming to choose his words carefully. I think Ophelia's scared about our financial situation, and she's looking for solutions anywhere she can find them. Solutions that involved removing me from my home and placing me somewhere I could be managed more easily, somewhere my presence wouldn't remind them of their dependence. David, look at me. I waited until his eyes met mine. I'm 69 years old, not 99. I drive myself to the grocery store, I manage my own finances, and I'm perfectly capable of making my own decisions about where I live. I know that, Mom. I told her you wouldn't be interested. Good, because I'm not going anywhere. After David left, I sat in my living room as the afternoon light faded. Assisted living. They wanted to tuck me away somewhere convenient, somewhere I couldn't accidentally overhear phone conversations or witness their true feelings about me. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found my lawyer's number. Robert Chen had been handling my business affairs for 10 years, and he'd never once questioned my decision to keep my real estate holdings private. Robert? It's Mabel Richardson. I need you to prepare some documents for me. It was time for David and Ophelia to learn that the tacky old lady they wanted to hide away was the only thing standing between them and homelessness. The papers arrived on Friday, delivered by certified mail. I watched from my window as David signed for the thick envelope, his face growing pale as he read the return address. Chen and Associates, attorneys at law. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. Mom, what is this? David's voice was barely controlled panic. There's a legal document here saying you own our apartment building. It says you own the whole complex. I was ready for this conversation. I'd been preparing for it all week. Yes, David, I do. The silence on the other end stretched so long, I wondered if the call had dropped. You, what? How is that possible? I bought it 6 years ago when the previous owner was facing foreclosure. It was a good investment. But how? Where did you get that kind of money? I settled back in my chair, the one Ophelia thought I should replace. I've been buying rental properties for 15 years, sweetheart. This building, the strip mall on 5th Street, several apartment complexes across town. I own 37 properties in total. Another long silence. Then, 37 properties? Mom, that's millions of dollars. Yes, it is. But you live in this tiny apartment. You shop at thrift stores. You always said you were on a fixed income. I never said I was on a fixed income. You assumed that because I'm 70 and live modestly. And yes, I shop at thrift stores because I see no point in paying full price for clothes when perfectly good ones are available for less. I could hear him breathing heavily, trying to process what I was telling him. Why didn't you ever tell me? Because I didn't want to be treated differently. I wanted to know that people cared about me for who I am, not what I have. So when we asked for help with the down payment on the car, you could have just written a check? Yes. And when Ophelia needed money for her mother's medical bills, I could have covered all of it without thinking twice. But you made us apply for loans. You let us stress about money for years. I took a breath, choosing my words carefully. David, I've given your family over $400,000 in the past 5 years. The car loan I co-signed and ended up paying off when you defaulted. The vacation to Europe that became a loan you never repaid. Every Christmas, every birthday, every emergency. I helped because I wanted to, not because I had to. 400,000? His voice was barely a whisper. The apartment building alone saved you over $120,000 in rent over 5 years. I charged you $2,800 when market rate was $5,500. Oh my God. Mom, I had no idea. I know you didn't, but Ophelia did. What do you mean? I'd been dreading this part. but it needed to be said. She knew I was helping financially. She just never cared to find out how much I was sacrificing to do it. I don't understand. David, at Christmas dinner, I heard her on the phone with her sister. She called me that tacky old lady who was only invited to pay for everything. The silence this time was different, heavy with the weight of recognition. She said that? Among other things. She laughed about how I didn't belong in your house, how embarrassing I was, how grateful she'd be when you made enough money that you wouldn't need my handouts anymore. Mom, I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything, but you need to understand something. The rent increase isn't personal vindictiveness. It's business. You're now paying market rate for a luxury apartment, the same rate any other tenant would pay, but we can't afford market rate. You know that. Then you'll need to make some choices. Downsize. Find something in your actual budget. Live within your means instead of depending on subsidies you didn't even realize you were getting. I heard a door slam in the background, followed by Ophelia's voice, shrill and demanding. Is that your mother? Give me the phone. Ophelia, maybe we should... Give me the phone, David. There was a rustling sound. Then Ophelia's voice came through clearly. What kind of sick game are you playing? She demanded, all pretense of sweetness gone. Hello, Ophelia. I understand you received some documents today. You've been lying to us for years, pretending to be some poor old woman while secretly owning half the city. I never pretended to be poor. I live modestly because I choose to. There's a difference. You let us think we were helping you. All those dinners you supposedly cooked for us, all those gifts you said were all you could afford, were all I thought you deserved, I interrupted, my voice turning cold, based on how you treated me. How we treated you? We included you in everything. We invited you to holidays. We let you babysit when we needed it. You used me, Ophelia. You used my money and my generosity, and you mocked me for it. You thought I was some pathetic old woman you had to tolerate for David's sake. That's not true. I heard you. Christmas night. Every word. The silence stretched between us, and I could almost hear her mind racing, trying to remember exactly what she'd said and who might have overheard. You were eavesdropping? I was washing the dishes you'd insisted I use. The expensive crystal that I'd bought as a housewarming gift 3 years ago. Look, maybe I said some things I shouldn't have, but... No maybe about it. You said exactly what you meant, and now you're facing the consequences. David! I heard her calling to him. Your mother has lost her mind. She's punishing us because her feelings got hurt. But David's voice, when it came back on the line, was different. Quieter. Mom, are you still there? I'm here. When you heard what she said, how did it make you feel? The question caught me off guard. After everything, he was asking about my feelings. It made me realize that I'd been fooling myself for 15 years, thinking that generosity would eventually earn me the respect and love I'd been giving freely. I love you. Mom, you know that, right? I know you do, David. But love without respect isn't enough anymore. Sunday morning, they came to my apartment together. I saw them through my kitchen window, walking up the path to my building. David looked exhausted, his shoulders hunched like he was carrying the weight of the world. Ophelia walked beside him, her designer handbag clutched tightly, her jaw set in determination. I'd been expecting this visit. I opened the door before they could knock. Come in. Ophelia pushed past David, her eyes scanning my living room with new awareness. The modest furniture, the simple decorations, the family photos on every surface. She was seeing it all differently now, realizing that the woman who lived in this small space controlled their entire living situation. We need to talk, she announced, her voice sharp with barely contained anger. Would you like some coffee? No, thank you, David said quickly, settling onto the sofa. He looked uncomfortable, like he wasn't sure whose side he was supposed to be on. Ophelia remained standing, her arms crossed. We want to know what it's going to take. I'm sorry? To go back to the way things were. What do you want from us? I sat down in my recliner, taking my time to adjust the cushions. I want you to explain to me why you think things should go back to the way they were. Because we're family, David said quietly. Families help each other. You're right, they do. But help goes both ways, David. Respect goes both ways. Ophelia stepped forward, her voice rising. So this is about what I said at Christmas? You're going to destroy our lives over some offhand comment? Destroy your lives? I looked at her calmly, I'm charging you market rate for a luxury apartment, the same rate I charge strangers. How is that destroying your life? Because you know we can't afford it. Then perhaps you should have thought about that before you decided I was just a tacky old lady who existed to pay your bills. David shifted uncomfortably. Mom, Ophelia says she's sorry about what she said. She was having a bad day and… Stop. I held up my hand. David, I want you to think about something. In the past 5 years, how many times has Ophelia thanked me for helping with your expenses? He frowned, clearly thinking. She's grateful, Mom. She just doesn't always express it well. How many times has she invited me to lunch, just the two of us? Or called to ask how I'm feeling? Or remembered my birthday without you reminding her? The silence stretched between us. David's face was growing paler with each question. How many times has she treated me like family instead of like an ATM? That's not fair, Ophelia snapped. I've always been polite to you. Polite. Yes, you have been polite. The way you'd be polite to a waitress or a cashier, someone providing a service you expect but don't particularly value. I value you. You value my money. There's a difference. Ophelia's composure finally cracked. Fine. You want honesty? Here's honesty. You drive me crazy with your advice and your old-fashioned opinions. You show up to our dinner parties in clothes from the bargain bin and expect to fit in with David's colleagues. You embarrass us. David looked horrified. Ophelia, No, let her finish, I said calmly. Please, continue. You act like you're this sweet, harmless grandmother, but you're manipulative. You use your money to control people, to make them feel guilty. And now you're doing it again, punishing us because we don't worship the ground you walk on. I nodded slowly. Thank you for your honesty. Now let me be honest with you. I stood up and walked to my bookshelf, pulling out a thick folder. These are receipts. Every penny I've spent on your family over the past 5 years. $437,000. I opened the folder, spreading the papers on my coffee table. Rent subsidies, car payments, vacation funds, emergency loans that were never repaid, Christmas gifts, birthday presents, anniversary dinners, furniture for your apartment. Ophelia stared at the papers, her face going white. I never asked for gratitude. I never demanded appreciation. I helped because I thought family was supposed to help each other. But family also means respect, Ophelia. It means not mocking the person who's been keeping you afloat. Mom, David whispered, staring at the receipts. I had no idea it was this much. I know you didn't, because you trusted me to tell you if it was too much, and you trusted her to treat me with basic human decency. I turned to Ophelia. You want to know what this is about? It's not about the comment at Christmas. It's about 15 years of being treated like hired help, of being tolerated instead of appreciated, of watching you spend my money while complaining that I embarrass you. Tears were running down David's face now. Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have seen it. I should have said something. You're not responsible for her behavior, David, but you are responsible for allowing it to continue in your presence. Ophelia was shaking now, whether from anger or fear, I couldn't tell. So what do you want? You want me to grovel? You want me to pretend I think you're wonderful? I want you to move out of my building. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. What? You have 30 days to find other accommodations. I'm terminating your lease. You can't do that. I pulled another document from the folder. Lease violation. Harassment of the property owner. It's perfectly legal. David looked stricken. Mom, please, don't do this. Ophelia made a mistake, but… David, you can find another apartment without her. The silence that followed was deafening. David stared at me, then at Ophelia, then back at me. You're asking me to choose. I'm not asking anything. I'm telling you that I will no longer subsidize a woman who has nothing but contempt for me. What you do with that information is up to you. Ophelia grabbed David's arm. Tell her she can't do this. Tell her we'll fight this in court. David gently removed her hand. Ophelia, maybe you should wait in the car. David, please, just give me a minute with my mother. After she left, David and I sat in silence for a long time. Finally, he spoke. What if she changes? What if she apologizes and really means it? I looked at my son. this man I'd raised and loved and sacrificed for, and I felt my heart breaking all over again. David, some people change when they face consequences. Others just get better at hiding who they really are. Which one do you think Ophelia is? He didn't answer, but the look in his eyes told me he already knew. 3 months later, I was repotting my African violets when I heard a familiar key in my lock. David stepped through the door, carrying a bouquet of daisies and wearing a nervous smile. "Hi, Mom." "Hello, sweetheart." I set down my gardening gloves and accepted the flowers. "These are beautiful. What's the occasion?" "I wanted to thank you." I raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "For forcing me to grow up." David looked different. Older, maybe, but also lighter somehow. The constant tension that had lived in his shoulders for years was gone. "I brought you something else." He pulled a check from his pocket. "It's not everything I owe you, but it's a start. First payment on that $400,000. I took the check, glancing at the amount, $5,000. "David, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. I've been looking at those receipts you showed us. Really looking at them. Mom, I let you carry us for years without even realizing it." I gestured for him to sit down. "Tell me what's been happening." He settled onto the sofa, running his hands through his hair. "Ophelia and I separated 2 weeks after that day in your apartment. She's staying with her sister in Portland." "I'm sorry to hear that." "Are you?" I considered the question honestly. "I'm sorry that your marriage ended. I'm not sorry that you're no longer with someone who treated you badly. She did treat me badly, didn't she?" I kept making excuses for her, telling myself she was just stressed or that she'd change eventually. "What made you finally see it?" David was quiet for a moment. "The day after you terminated our lease, she spent the entire day calling everyone we knew, trying to get them to convince you to change your mind. She told them you were senile, that you were being manipulated by gold diggers, that you'd stolen money from your own family." I felt a familiar sting of hurt, but it was duller now, less sharp. "When that didn't work, she tried to turn me against you completely. She said you were a narcissist who was destroying our marriage out of jealousy. She wanted me to cut contact with you entirely. And I realized that in 15 years of marriage, I'd never once heard her say a genuinely kind word about you. Not once. Every conversation about you was either complaining or asking for money." I reached over and patted his hand. "I'm proud of you for seeing that. It took me too long." His voice was thick with regret. "Mom, I let her treat you terribly, and I'm ashamed of that. You were trying to keep peace in your marriage. I understand that. No, that's just an excuse. I was being a coward." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the late afternoon light filter through my small windows. "I found a new apartment," David said eventually. "Nothing fancy, 2 bedrooms, decent neighborhood. I can actually afford it on my salary." "That sounds perfect. I was wondering, would you like to see it? Maybe we could have dinner there next week? I'm learning to cook." I smiled. "I'd love that, but I have one condition." "What's that?" "Let me bring dessert. I make an excellent apple pie." "Deal." He grinned, and for a moment he looked like the little boy who used to help me bake cookies on Sunday afternoons. "David, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Are you happy? Really happy?" He thought about it for a long moment. "I'm getting there. It's hard. Starting over at 42. But yeah, I think I'm happier than I've been in years." "Good. That's all I ever wanted for you. What about you, Mom? Are you happy?" I looked around my small apartment, at the simple furniture and family photos, at the flowers David had brought me sitting in a mason jar on my windowsill. I'm at peace. For the first time in 15 years, I'm at peace. After David left, I sat in my recliner with a cup of tea, thinking about the journey that had brought me here. The scared young mother who'd worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table. The woman who'd built a real estate empire one small property at a time. The grandmother who'd been mocked and dismissed by the very people she'd been supporting. And now, finally, the woman who'd learned that respect couldn't be bought, only earned. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. "Hello? Mrs. Richardson? This is Amanda Chen, Robert's daughter. I work with him at the law firm now." "Of course. How can I help you, Amanda?" "I'm calling about the Riverside property deal. The seller accepted your offer. Congratulations. You're now the owner of a 12-unit apartment complex." I smiled, making a note in my property management book. Property number 38. Thank you, Amanda. Please have the paperwork ready for me to sign on Monday. Will do. You know, Mrs. Richardson, I have to say, in all my years helping Dad with real estate transactions, I've never met anyone quite like you. How so? Most investors flash their wealth, make sure everyone knows how successful they are. But you've built this incredible portfolio while staying completely under the radar. It's impressive. After I hung up, I walked to my kitchen window and looked out at the city beyond. Somewhere out there, Ophelia was probably still telling anyone who would listen about the crazy old woman who'd ruined her life. Somewhere, families were struggling with the same dynamics that had nearly destroyed mine. But here, in my small apartment surrounded by my modest things, I had something that couldn't be bought or inherited or stolen. I had peace. I had my son's respect. And I had the quiet satisfaction of knowing that I'd built something lasting with my own hands and my own wisdom. The tacky old lady in the green cardigan had turned out to be worth more than any of them had imagined. And that was enough. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below, and meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.